Good day, everyone, and welcome back to another exciting session as part of the Intelligent Automation World Series. We are now on day 2 and in our second session of the 5 that we'll be offering for you today. Thank you for joining us once again, and for those of you who are just joining us for the first time, let me walk you through a couple of features and logistics to make sure that you can get the best experience from today's session and that we can get you engaged early and often. On your audience view screen, it is widget-driven, which means that you can move it around, raise, lower, maximize things to your preference. I would like to point out 3 key features. On the left-hand side is a Q&A box. That's where you're going to put any information in if you need questions about the conference as a whole. If you encounter any kind of technical issues, either one of those situations, Ashley will get right back to you to help you with that. But also we would like you to engage and be involved in the session. So if you have comments, if you have questions to present to our 2 speakers, put those in there anytime throughout the session. We'll queue those up and deliver those to them at the end of their content presentation. Next, on the right-hand side of the screen, I'm going to give you a brief introduction to both of our speakers if you'd like to learn a bit more about them. Their full bios are available for you by just putting the down arrow on the bio widget, and you'll see their wonderful photos and all of the information about their background. Additionally, below each speaker's picture, you're going to see some buttons that you can connect with them further. So please take advantage of that because you'll probably have some questions after this. But be sure to network just like you would an in-person event by using some of those buttons and taking the opportunity to follow up and ask further questions. And then finally, we always like to give you something to take away with you. In this case, it's not homework. It's really good resources. We have 2 resources available for you. A white paper that talks about automation singularity. It's a term that we're going to introduce in this session that will provide you a bit more background about that. And then also above that is something we've partnered with on this as well as a co-editorial, a very, very meaty, in-depth report that is called the Intelligent Automation Global Market Report, half 1, because we do it twice a year. This particular report focuses all on change management. The number 1 thing identified as a lessons learned for everyone going through automation. So take those 2 items with you. If you don't have a chance to download them as we're going through the session, no worries. Tomorrow you'll receive a recording to the link to the session. You may play back the session at that time, and anytime when you access that recording, you may also download those resources. So with those administrative things out of the way, let's get to the good stuff. It's my absolute pleasure to welcome to the digital stage our 2 speakers, Maureen and Guha. Maureen Fleming is the Program Vice President for IDC's Business Process Management and Middleware Research Group. Just a couple of tidbits with her. She has more than 20 years of industry and analyst experience. She has across multiple different organizations. I also like to point out, for those of you who like to make a personal connection, her long journey began when she started her career in technology as a programmer for the University of Michigan, and that's where she also has a bachelor's degree of general studies with a concentration in computer science, economics, and journalism, a well-rounded background. So we'll welcome Maureen to the stage, and also Guha is joining us, who's the AVP of Product Management for Edgeware. And for Guha, you'll see that he is the Senior Director in that area. He works with one of the programs called assistedge. We're going to hear a little bit more about that as well. He plays a very strategic role with enterprise automation and helps to drive innovation throughout the entire marketplace, bringing more than 20 years of both business consulting and technology as well as entrepreneurship to the stage. So let me just say hello to Maureen. And also, I just wanted to mention to all of you, you'll see on the left-hand side, if you would like to engage in the conversation on Twitter, please follow #assistedge or to follow along, or #IAWeek, and we would appreciate your engagement in social media as well. So Maureen, let me first turn over to you, and later on you're going to be hearing from Guha. Welcome to the digital stage. Maureen, now over to you.
Okay, thanks a lot, Rochelle, and hello to everyone. For the next 20 minutes, I'll present ideas, survey results, and data about the future of work and how the workforce of digital workers and human workers are converging to a hybrid force. At IDC, we're organizing concepts around the emerging hybrid workforce under the term future of work. And my presentation today will start out with what we mean by that, along with survey data covering investments, types of investments customers are making, as well as key business drivers that actually are causing people to want to focus on this topic. Next, we'll cover process automation and the technologies businesses are adopting to build and support a hybrid workforce. And finally, we'll cover how RPA and intelligent automation are evolving to broaden support of the converged hybrid workforce. Future of work is a term increasingly used to describe a fundamental shift in the work models that foster human and machine collaboration, enable new skills and worker experiences, and support an environment unbounded by time or physical space. Future of work is technology-enabled, but it's really not fully about technology. It's about building the culture inside an organization that's able to behave more adaptively in support of ongoing innovation and changes in initiatives and objectives. It focuses on removing location and distance barriers, and it's also focused on building and managing a human and digital workforce that's able to rebalance work between humans and machines to ensure that people provide the customer intimacy and high-value thinking while machines work on tasks that are repetitive and benefit from standardization and higher speeds. Looking at future of work initiatives that are technology-based, there are several different categories that align with the culture, with space, and with force. The blues are tied to space, the purples are tied to culture, and the green, the green one at the bottom is tied to workforce investments. And not unexpectedly, security tops the list of future of work technology-based initiatives. And this is according to an IDC Future of Work survey conducted about a little bit less than a year ago. Nearly 50% of respondents are creating security policies to support the new workspace requirements that unbind a workforce from time and physical space. Talent management, training, and reskilling were the most common technology initiatives aimed to improve a work culture. In fact, technology initiatives supporting space and culture topped investments in workforce automation and augmentation. Workforce initiatives, however, did include AI, robotic process automation, and other efforts to augment work capabilities. Sorry, this is moving without me clicking it, so let's see if it stabilizes. So for this next slide, I thought we would go through the types of process automation that are involved with process automation in general. Wait, there's one more slide. This got moved a little bit, so my apologies for the confusion. So first off, let's talk about the benefits of future of work investments. Why are organizations so focused on this topic? So part of the survey, we looked at what the actual top drivers are for work transformation. And so even though space and cultural initiatives were more common, the actual top driver for work transformation was tied to employee productivity, with more than 50% of the respondents naming this as a top driver. The second was cost savings at about 47%. And finally, improving the culture tied to employee engagement and workforce experience was the third highest driver. These are somewhat contradictory results, indicating an imbalance between the drivers and the actual investments in initiatives. But there is a consistency in the fact that a goal of future work is aimed at organizing how and work is performed and building a culture that's able to attract and retain talent. And at the same time, there's the ability to reskill workers as a core competency needed so that more workers are able to handle new types of tasks and increasingly dynamic work structures. You can assume that if your organization is focused on future of work, leaders will want tangible business value from their investments measured in cost savings. We know this because employee productivity and cost savings both show up as top drivers that we measured in our survey, and those also align with financial performance-based outcomes. These sorts of tangible outcomes are derived from process redesign that frees up time for workers to focus on higher value work while machines automate the lower value work. It also means process automation must more rapidly identify and mitigate process failures to drive down the cost of mistakes. And in today's competitive culture, whether work is performed by human or machine, more time and effort will ultimately be spent focusing on being proactive with customers. As this slide shows, there are different types of process automation. Digital workers mimic repetitive task work and automate low-risk decision-making. This typically consists of robotic process automation, intelligent capture software, and intelligent automation platforms. The next category, hybrid workers, combine human workers with augmented support. The augmentation comes in the form of a digital assistant or intelligent digital assistant, which also provides an interface between machines and humans. Transaction processing uses a variety of automation technologies to process simple and complex business transactions. Straight-through processing is machine-to-machine, end-to-end process automation for things like order-to-cash or distributed payment processing. Machine-to-machine automation can be as simple as requesting data or a web service from an application and getting a response back, or as complex as the orchestration required for distributed claims processing. Finally, AI-injected automation provides automated and augmented decision-making, typically through the use of machine learning for predictive and prescriptive analytics. The goals of predictive analytics is to improve the dynamic behaviors of a process, and for prescriptive analytics to improve the quality of decision-making. Today, the collections of technologies that fall under what IDC calls intelligent process automation, each of these different columns on this slide, accounts for $11.5 billion in spending annually. Individual types of process automation can be linked together and classified into classes of automation. The first two columns, digital workers and hybrid workers, represent a hybrid workforce, which we classify as labor-centric automation. This is primarily focused on the collective work performed to complete a task. A hybrid workforce didn't even exist 5 years ago, and now the evolution away from an entirely human capital-based workforce is a huge topic of focus, where humans and digital robots coexist in this hybrid workplace. The next two columns, transaction processing and straight-through processing, represent system-centric automation, where the requirements for speed and managing complexity require custom development along with different types of middleware to handle the automation. Over the next 5 years, we'll see RPA bleed into system-centric automation, and technologies of system-centric automation, like API management, will be used in combination with RPA for labor-centric automation. In other words, the separations between the technologies used in process automation will be increasingly porous. And finally, the last, AI-injected automation, represents a new generation of decision-making, representing the type of automated decision-making that makes tasks and processes more dynamic. This wasn't done before because a human didn't have the data required to make these decisions, and certainly couldn't make rapid decisions in the time required to support dynamic behaviors of a process. An example is making an automated decision about whether to route work to a digital worker or to a human worker. Another example is to make recommendations about what the next best action should be in the face of a complex set of options. The latter helps to improve overall decision-making, speeds up decision-making, and decreases the training requirements for end users. I said before that total spending on intelligent process automation was about $11.5 billion worldwide. IDC forecasts put spending at $21 billion in 5 years, representing a 12% annual rate of growth, which is a fast rate of growth for such a large market. Decision-centric automation will be the fastest growing segment, as well as the most emerging segment in this forecast. As an emerging segment, we may be underestimating the impact of machine learning used for process automation, but are taking a conservative approach to look and see how this market unfolds. Labor-centric automation is the second fastest growing category, and this includes RPA, capture software, and process automation platforms. And the largest category is system-centric automation, including integration, API management, and event-driven middleware. This forecast maintains a separation between classes of automation for consistency. However, the lines really are blurring, with one type of technology able to substitute for another. A classic example is building a custom script with an API at the front end, substituting for the use of RPA, and vice versa. But they also blur because process design is shifting to focus on straight-through processing using a variety of technologies. This slide shows what I mean by blurring. The columns I've covered in the previous slide and the rows represent I've covered in the previous slide, and the rows represent different technologies and how they align with each type of automation. One theme I want to stress in today's presentation is the need to shift thinking from automation to thinking about simplification. With the investments enterprises are making in talent acquisition, retention, and reskilling, the simpler the task is, the more effective these initiatives are. It's easier to retain employees who don't waste their time doing unnecessary work or begin training on and have to be trained on complicated processes. It's much more realistic to reskill workers to support more dynamic jobs and work structures if they don't need to learn a variety of applications that are required to do their job. So when you look at this full stack and this full set of assets for process automation, keep in mind that many of these will be configured for simplification, and automation will be the underlying theme for enabling that simplification. So that means that process automation is core to process simplification, but tasks and digital assistance are equally as important. Today's major focus is on tasks and labor automation. Robotic process automation, or RPA, is a building block of labor automation. It's the first class of commercial software that actually cares about how work is performed and how to mimic that work to automate it. Many of you in this session are probably have a development background or are a current developer, and that's the other place where how people work is important, because you may have built custom code explicitly to automate it. I know that when I was a developer, I spent a lot of my time doing that. When you look at custom and commercial applications, though, the primary activity is inputting information or extracting information, doing actual work separately, and then uploading the results of the labor into the application. But the concern isn't about performing the work, but making sure the work is performed. And it isn't about making the decisions used to produce the work, but is about providing the resources you need to make decisions. That's the core focus of most enterprise applications. The exact opposite is true for RPA. It breaks the tasks down into smaller pieces and then automates each piece. Once each of these micro tasks are automated, the overall task is automated. And when the task still requires human touch, the task is substantially augmented using RPA standalone or in combination with other technologies, such as AI-based technologies. The current obsession or focus with RPA is really because it's tackling the problem of getting actual work done, and that is a unique value proposition in process-related technology. New forms of AI-based capture technology are growing in importance for task automation. In this case on this slide, the effort is to take structured and semi-structured content and use one of many types of AI to capture, categorize, and convert the content into machine-readable form before passing it to automation, like RPA, to validate and complete the task. The innovations coming from AI around capture is also a huge topic. Vendors are making significant investments in AI, and R&D investments around the world are substantial. In the process here, we're seeing growing use of newer algorithms to improve the accuracy and speed of capturing unstructured content, while at the same time minimizing the training data needed with the goal of replacing manual data entry that is often the core of a task. We're seeing this applied in manufacturing, in financial processes, in digital commerce as a major automation asset. And we're only going to see more and more use cases as technology advances. Over the next 5 years, we expect RPA and intelligent automation to evolve. We expect better interoperability with existing enterprise technology assets. This includes support for REST APIs that can call bots and digital workers on a self-service basis. We expect those APIs to appear in the unified catalog of APIs and connectors offered by integration vendors. And we expect RPA and IA to be integral to system-centric automation and, more importantly, to support event-driven architectures to align with more and more how work is actually performed across an organization in a more proactive way. We also expect RPA and intelligent automation to evolve to better support knowledge work and knowledge workers and be available on demand generically for Windows applications and other strategic enterprise applications. In other words, we expect RPA to have a lightweight and portable user interface and become a digital assistant directly supporting knowledge work. As digital assistants, RPA and intelligent automation behaviors will change to become more proactive with human workers to let them know when they have a new priority and automate as much as possible to provide for that new support for that new priority. RPA and IA will compete and converge with other assistive technologies emerging from other markets, such as chatbots and intelligent digital assistants. So for those of you investing in RPA and intelligent automation, it's important to understand the roadmaps of the vendors that you're evaluating to ensure that they align with this broader sense of how processes need to change and how they how the RPA and IA technologies interoperate with those. For recommendations beyond making sure about the roadmap, looking at today's labor-centric design, you should emphasize your thinking around straight-through processing with minimal yet critical interactivity. I think we're past the time of maturity in RPA where things will be automated without concern for how augmentation actually works. And so the idea that the RPA needs to have a task orientation with the user interface is something to really think about and how you're going to build that capability in some of your solutions. So in general, you use human tasks to collect missing information, and for decision making, you anticipate the emergence of intelligent agents, and you assume your workforce will be hybrid and will need to interoperate with each other. You should expect vendors to deliver products or roadmaps that offer externalized capabilities that can be broadly leveraged. And I covered those in the last slide: modern APIs, digital assistants, and being able to work proactively on behalf of whatever solution is being built. I've also been involved with primary research looking at adoption of AI across different markets. And what is surprising is how the tide has shifted from being problem-prone to being results-driven. So I now believe that, especially with some of the latest surveys I've done, that the use of AI, while new in process automation, is very successful in other areas. And your organization and you should start learning how to begin incorporating into process design. Data collection is critical. It makes sense to evaluate process mining and insights to automate collection and produce baseline statistics, and then move from there to start creating some repeatability in data collection and also gain insights. Predictive analytics and prescriptive analytics and content-centric AI skills can be applied to different areas of process design, especially where it's imperative to improve dynamic behaviors. So pick one of those areas and then just begin experimenting. A lot of organizations started the experiment, and at this point, in some areas that we're looking at, organizations that have not started using AI are no longer competitive with organizations that already do. So it's becoming a hot topic right now, just purely from a competitive perspective. Thank you, everyone, for your time, and I look forward to your questions. Meanwhile, I'm handing this off to Guha to discuss topics related to what Edgeberg calls the automation singularity.
Thanks, Maureen, and it was really a wonderful session. The analysis was very incisive, and I'm sure the audience gained from the direction and the guidance that you had to share. It's a great segue for us to talk around what we mean by automation singularity. But prior to that, I'd like to just talk briefly and lay out some context around why automation singularity, and as we see and engage with our customers around RPA, why we believed that the need was to go beyond just automation, just looking at individual processes, but look at a broader, greater theme. So the first thing, from a context perspective, I think this is kind of cliche, but the world is dramatically changing, and some key data points are around how today's customers' orientation towards the world has changed. As in, people talk about the Uber generation, where asset ownership is no longer as important as experiences. Likewise, the nature of work is changing. Maureen alluded to that. Another way around the nature of work is around the gig economy, and loyalty as a concept is not as important as in the past. The third is the whole element of heightened expectations from customers who expect a dramatically different level of personalization. Time to market needs to be very, very different from what it was a generation back. And what this means is business models need to be extremely agile, and the risk of not being able to switch with these customer shifts is that you get a very successful company could become obscure very, very quickly. Likewise, the ability to manage cost and manage operational efficiency can make a significant difference. We talk about organizations fearing getting Amazoned, and the nature of organizations are not in retail or in technology, but they could be in insurance, or they could be in banking or in healthcare, where the fear that a hyper-efficient operation could significantly change the landscape. It's a big concern for many of the executives that we talk to. So that's one. Second is, what do you get out of driving agility? What do you get out of reframing the organization? Some of the key themes that we have seen is that a significant lift in customer satisfaction. Maureen spoke about how the customer becomes centric in the way successful organizations look at business. And likewise, we have heard anecdotal data of how anecdotal data around how shared services, many of the more mature shared services, are changing their orientation from pure cost management towards how they can support employees in the HR space or customers in the tech help desk. Likewise, when it comes to operational efficiency, one key element is to what extent is your ability to change cycle times, response times, etc., change the way you interact with both your customers and your partners. Likewise, with business productivity, we have spoken to customers changing the conversation from days and hours towards seconds, changing conversations from elaborate process towards execution to something like a self-service. And all these things obviously have a significant impact around the bottom line and around how you can grow your top line. So I think it's very important when we look at automation for us to not focus purely on tactical benefits of deploying a few bots, if you will, or optimizing small processes, and instead looking at what the broader potential is. So what we intended when we defined automation singularity, that was a broader launch that we did when we launched our product in August, was to talk around how this could significantly transform enterprise expectations. And when we looked at RPA as a specific space, as an assistedge is an RPA product, what we learned is customers focus on key three themes in terms of business capability. The first one is around customer experience. And increasingly, we have heard customers across different industries, different sizes, tell that cost efficiency is no longer their primary driver. They are looking at how RPA can aid the digital transformation agenda, how it can help them engage with customers much better. Likewise, the ability for them to be agile in terms of responding to a customer demand, answering a query quickly, and oftentimes it could also be in terms of how quickly they could adapt their processes to take advantage of market opportunities. That's a big one. Likewise, around how quickly they can scale. The whole definition of TCO can be looked at differently if you are able to use technologies in a creative fashion and use more out of your existing infrastructure. So what exactly is automation singularity? We felt we needed a term which could encapsulate what the future could be. So we could look at automation singularity in two broad frames. One is in terms of what this means from an outcome perspective, and this essentially would be the end state, if you will, of a hyper-optimized organization where the capability of every resource available is tapped to the maximum extent, and this should ideally create a whole horizon of possibilities where you could target product personalization, which would not have been possible with traditional approaches. Another way of looking at automation singularity, and Maureen also alluded to this with a different terminology, around how this brings together a human and a digital together to seamlessly deliver outcomes. And the manifestation could be in terms of work seamlessly moving between different digital workers, between digital workers and humans, management by a digital worker and vice versa. With the idea being that the end outcome or the business objective is primary, and the way you orchestrate the different resources that you have at your disposal becomes something which are levers for you to achieve the objective. In terms of how we can, obviously automation singularity is an aspiration. As you get closer to what you thought was the state of nirvana, you would ideally identify more opportunities, and your horizon constantly keeps widening, and that's really a great thing because it pushes you on the boundaries and constantly expand the capability set that you have and the market opportunities that you can take advantage of. Right? We look at it in three broad frames. At the starting level, you're looking at it in terms of traditional rule-based automation. As it matures, you start building, you get a lot more data-centric, and your decision-making tends to be more intelligent. And then in the final state, you build the ability to build resilience internally, you build the ability to optimize processes so that in some future state, your processes are learning, picking up from the market, adjusting themselves so that they can achieve the business objectives that have been laid out for it, right? And this is where we believe that's really the ultimate future for RPA. The RPA of today is going to constantly evolve, and it's going to fuse very closely with the human worker of tomorrow to kind of achieve the state that we call automation singularity. In terms of levels of automation or levels of intelligence, we kind of laid it out in 5 different levels, and some of this is based on the way automation is looked at in the automobile industry. And some key points out here. So the intent is not for organizations to say they are at level 1 of automation, of level 5 of automation. It is to see which processes are significant for you, which segments in your business process would you want to invest in and take a very data-centric approach to kind of build intelligence in. And some of the benefits that you could get as you are looking at intelligence is, can you have the ability by which your processes, your resources, which could be a combination of human and digital workers, can be scaled up literally in runtime? Can allocations happen such that work allocations happen such that you achieve your SLAs while ensuring that your resource usage is optimized? How do you do fault tolerance by early prediction of potential failures and taking remedial action? The remedial action could be requeuing work items to other segments. It could be by spawning additional resources, and these resources could again be hardware or human in terms of whatever is required. And the ability for processes to learn by themselves and improve based on past experience. I think that's the kind of AI that we would like to see as we go down from a very basic automation or a rule-based automation towards an autonomous automation. In terms of value generated, and these are scenarios where we have seen automation applied in an intelligent fashion, deliver tremendous value for our customers. One of them was in a telco where, and I think I should again emphasize, the key parameter by which value is delivered is not in terms of the number of bots deployed or the extent of deployment, but in terms of how creatively these bots have been integrated into the larger process flow, and how you handle elements of managing exceptions and managing compliance and risk in a very holistic fashion. I think that makes a significant difference. So we have seen one is in a telco where the call resolutions and the repeats went down by 98%. Again, we were able to identify the reasons why there were second and multiple calls, get all the data upfront to the agent so that the agent, and give directions to the agent to make the right resolution. And there we saw a dramatic reduction in repeat calls. For a retailer, we were able to manage the back office processing in the invoice space, using automation and managing exceptions in a proactive manner. We were able to reduce the processing time from, I believe it was somewhere between 4 to 8 days, to oftentimes we were able to manage it within the same day in certain sectors, and in others it was closer to 1 to 2 days. Significant reduction. Another great example, and I hope that we are able to continue this journey for a 1-year period for a leading automobile manufacturer. Our invoice processing, we have managed a 0 error rate. Again, what we did out here was created the ability to predict those scenarios where there are likely to be exceptions and move them into an exception management queue. And the last one was around AHT reduction for a bank. And again, the key point out here is not so much the automation that we did, but the business value that we were able to deliver. Moving on, what are the key elements or how do we approach the overall process? We believe that there are 3 key items that you need to consider as part of your journey towards automation singularity. The first piece is a good appreciation of your current state, your existing process, at a very granular level in terms of what exactly are you doing, what are the various nuances or branches that are possible, so that A, you could take a decision whether you should automate it in its current form, or whether you should look at re-engineering it if that's relevant. Second, if you do want to automate it, what is the right approach to automation? Very clearly, RPA is one approach, and it's a very valid approach for automation. But there are scenarios where other approaches would be more valid. So it gets you a sense of which approach to take. And then once you decide to go down, let's say, the RPA path, if you have a good sense of the process flow, you could ensure that the RPA flow works out, right? The second piece is in terms of traditional RPA or automation. Here, there could be 2 variants. One is in terms of the unattended automation, or the automation where there's no human involvement in the process. And the second is where the RPA agent works very closely with the human agent towards task execution. The third piece is around the whole business around orchestrating the activity across both human and digital agents. And we believe all 3 pieces are important, and a holistic view is critical if you want to achieve the end business outcomes that our business stakeholders expect from us. There is what we typically find, and we caution many of our customers, is that we do not want to rush into automation and achieve tactical benefits in terms of automating individual pieces, but have a look at it from end to end, identify which automation elements are going to give you a business benefit, and focus your energies there. And lastly, in terms of what would be our key recommendations, clearly if we want to take the journey towards automation singularity, we are looking at significant opportunities, and we are looking at really reshaping the way the organizations look at business processes and the internal systems. So we believe that A, we need to have a lot of clarity around what we want to achieve and in which segments do we want to target. You might not want to focus your energies across the board. It would be prudent to focus it in certain segments. And then this needs a senior management, probably the directions and support from the board. And we look at it as intervention in 4 key segments. One is the people and the culture angle, creating leaders from the team, and creating an environment of innovation and rapid learning. The second piece is around making sure that the right technologies are deployed. And as I had mentioned earlier, this is clearly picking up technologies that work for a different organization might not work here, picking the right pieces, the right technology elements. Third is around how do we manage risk. Extremely important, because once you move away from human agents towards digital agents, the nature of risk changes. I think we want to be very proactive about this, and also aware and with a good sense of what could go wrong, so that we could take proactive measures, or probably not automate certain processes if that makes more sense. The last piece is how do we set up a governance framework here? How do we ensure that A, we build capabilities to scale up from pilots towards larger rollouts. B, we also have the mechanism to capture metrics to constantly measure what has been achieved and to ensure that directionally we are always heading towards meeting those business objectives. That should be the primary purpose of the agenda. And Rochelle, back to you, and happy to answer questions.
Okay, thanks so much. We have a lot of questions from the audience, and we encourage you to keep those coming. In the event that we don't get to all the questions, we will present them to our speakers, and they'll be able to reach back out to you via email. So just before we go into the audience questions, I will put up one more last polling question. This is just to let us know if you've done a good job and piqued your interest, and if we might be able to help you further. So there's some questions that you'll see coming up on the screen in terms of what additional help that you might like after this, whether or not you need to learn more about the term that we've introduced with Automation Singularity, you would like to get a demo, talk to an expert, or you can select more than one of those. So I'll leave that on the screen as we go to our audience questions. And so the first one, Maureen, this has been requested to be sent to you from Ian. You introduced that idea of the role that AI is going to play. Ian would like to know if you can cite a use case, one of the better use cases you've seen where AI has been playing a major part already.
So one of the things, if we look at AI across different areas, the way that I'm dividing it is into machine learning use cases that are tied to predictive analytics as well as prescriptive analytics, and then this sort of content-centric AI that's tied to being able to take unstructured content and create some form of machine-readable data out of that unstructured aspect. The areas that are on the unstructured side of it, the areas that are really gaining ground are computer vision based, where you're taking some kind of image and being able to process it to be able to convert it. And in RPA itself, computer vision is used to be able to to understand what's going on a screen across different environments. But when you look at it from the perspective of processing an invoice or a purchase order or other types of content, then we're seeing success with that type of computer vision used in that use case. Another area where a lot of organizations are experimenting is in natural language processing, which takes unstructured content that's tied to text or voice and converting that to some kind of machine-readable outcome. And in those cases, things like sentiment analysis tend to be popular use cases, and that's particularly true for vendors that are working on AI to embed those capabilities into their own products. On the machine learning side of it, predictive analytics is becoming more and more important to support both operational decisions as well as aid in planning.
Okay, thanks for that. And Guha, I'd like to also get your input on this as well.
Sure. So in addition to what Maureen just said, another way to kind of look at AI, specifically in the RPA automation space, is to look at AI from a context-free and a context-based AI. So the context-free would tend to be in the nature of text extraction, let's say extracting information from an invoice, and so that you can automate that flow off instead of manually typing in. And subsequent to that, what is contextual is decisions that you make on that invoice around whether do you want to approve this invoice or send it to a human agent for approval, or auto-detecting whether this invoice could be a likely duplicate or whether this invoice could be fraudulent. Ability to figure that out, that would be a contextual AI. So I guess there is a role for both of them, and we see both of them extremely significant from an RPA space.
All right, thanks so much for that. And Guha, we're going to stay with you on this one. Abhijit would like to know, and I'm thinking that you can maybe draw from some of your client experiences with this and how you guide them on this. Because of AI, you often release resources from operation. And suddenly, when any bot stops working due to some kind of technical issue, How do you deal with the fact that those folks are no longer in operation? What have you seen some of your clients do in terms of handling that?
Yes, we have seen, and this is where risk management and governance become extremely important, not just in AI, but also overall in whenever you do an automation, you also need to make sure that how do you handle scenarios where if the expertise has entirely been automated and you no longer retain that expertise, what do you do in a scenario where the automation stops functioning? This could be for AI or for bots in the other sense. And I think the answer to this is it depends. There are certain scenarios where we could build the capability, build out SOPs, etc., to mitigate this risk. And in other scenarios, the best solution might be that you don't go beyond. You always end up having at least 10 to 15% of the human expertise always there, not just from a BCP perspective, but also from a perspective of having that embedded intelligence that comes only with time. So I think in today's times, AI still has its limits, and I would always expect that there is some retained knowledge from individuals, and we don't want to lose that.
Okay, thanks so much for that. Maureen, I'm going to bounce back to you for the next one. Morris is very interested in understanding perspectives on the role of emotions in the design of RPA and IA. We often hear people talking about designing it for empathy and those types of things. But emotions as a whole, what have you seen and what advice can you offer on how to put that into your automation design?
I think that people are trying to think about the emotional context when they're trying to get a sense of the sentiment of the interaction. And so on the one hand, emotion is really important. And so from that perspective, then using a machine to sort of predict what the emotion actually is kind of ironic in a way. But mostly there's a focus on sentiment analysis and that type of thing. In other cases, there's an issue of being able to score how something should be routed. So, for example, if you're designing something where you're trying to detect the emotion and you're using sentiment analysis, and the probability score says that someone is likely to have some kind of emotion that could be better helped with human intervention, then this idea of designing in emotional support in the form of human beings is a much better design pattern. So we see these things working in combination to be able to have humans where they're needed and machines supporting an assessment of when humans are needed, and then also this dynamic routing structure that's involved. Personally, for me, I think it's going to take a long time to expect a bot to be human enough to be able to support tense or stressful situations.
Okay, excellent perspective. Thanks so much. The next one is going to be staying with you as well, Maureen. This one came from Glenn. This was kind of when you were talking about what's coming up and the changes that you see. Glenn would like to know, what disruptors have you identified that could change the trajectory of the changes you described in either a positive or a negative direction?
Okay, so I'm assuming, Glenn, that you mean talking about how RPA and IA is going to evolve, because that, I think, is mostly the kind of a roadmap thinking. And so for me, on the negative side, what I think is happening is that if RPA does not evolve to more broadly support a user interface, either directly or indirectly, then the total capacity for what can be automated and useful for RPA will be significantly circumscribed, because that means that digital assistants don't factor into the design, and that means that digital assistants can't support knowledge workers or less precise work. So for me, this ability to have a user interface or work really seamlessly with very lightweight user interface is absolutely critical for being able to broaden out the overall market for RPA and, by extension, intelligent automation. I also think that RPA solutions tend to be very narrow and sort of internally focused. And when you start thinking about broadening out to think about process design that needs to cross enterprise barriers and support ecosystems of partners and customers, this idea that you could be internally focused is not useful. And so this idea of being able to access bots via standard ways like calling an API becomes very critical for making the market much larger. So for me, the vendors that understand that they need to interoperate in a much bigger world than they're aware of will help us understand more which ones will be the most successful. And collectively, as a market, we also will get a better understanding of whether they will be as grow as large as everyone expects RPA to be, or whether it will be circumscribed by having this insular thinking about what RPA actually is and the impact inside the organization.
Okay, thank you. That was some great insight there, certainly, and some good sound things to consider. Guha, this is going to come back to you. This is a bit of a technical one. Lisa would like to know what ancillary tools are required or helpful for effective RPA, such as XML, SQL, HTML, or languages such as Python. Lisa would like to know, does this get replaced with middleware? And then she has a second part to the question, so I'll repeat these if you need them. Does ETL, extract, transform, load, play a role, or is this now the job of middleware? So are any of those things replaced by middleware, or what role do they have in terms of implementing effective RPA automation strategy?
Yeah, well, so let me answer this question in two parts. One is for the specifically for the intelligent automation, where you do want to build contextual intelligence, and I made the distinction between context-free and contextual intelligence. When you do want to build contextual intelligence, you are looking at having an ability to build algorithms within your organization that meet your unique needs. And here, one option might be to go down the path of the Python way and build AI algorithms. Or, we also have the ability by which we could leverage GUI-based algorithmic tools. And both are possibilities, and we have worked with both. The other part is in terms of leveraging RPA and how it integrates with your enterprise systems. Typically, the RPA tool per se would do the bulk of the heavy lifting, but there will always be certain scenarios where certain processing might need to be done outside of the RPA tool, and that might need technologies, some of which Lisa mentioned, as in it might require working with JSON files, it might be working with certain systems where the data needs to be moved from system A to B, etc. Lisa, most of the while you're implementing an RPA tool, you'll be working with the tool that you select. So you want to make sure that you pick tools that have AI capability within, that have the integration capability within, so that you do not need to do a lot of technology work outside of the RPA platform.
Okay, thank you so much for that. And we're out of time for questions, but I did want to say that we just got a wonderful comment from Carolina, who was saying that in the age of emotions, as we were just talking about that, we are emotional beings, and people still like to hear or feel that their feelings are validated. She mentions that a lot of times when we know that AI is involved or AI is controlling a request, that sometimes put folks into feeling like they haven't really been heard. So she made a comment that she happens to be in marketing, and she always makes sure that she adds some personal touches, humanization, such as a photo on any of the marketing things that she puts out. So, Caroline, that's an excellent comment and a good example of a way that you can still put a human touch to something that can be an automated process. So we thank you for sharing that. And on that note, we still have more questions coming in, and as I mentioned, I'm sorry that we didn't get to all of them. We do really appreciate your active participation. You've all been great so far this week about that. We will present those to the speakers, and I'll get back to you via email. Guha and Maureen, this has been fabulous. I loved having two different perspectives, product and market, wider view, those types of things gave us a lot of things to think about. We did get a comment that this was both educational and very informative. That came in just recently as well. So obviously these things, you've got us all thinking. It's been quite useful. A few last housekeeping things for everybody. Just a quick reminder that tomorrow you'll receive an email with a link to the recording. Feel free to play that back for your lunch and learns, team meetings, or any place else you can leverage the material. Also, take full advantage of those free giveaways. Excellent resources. The white paper on automation singularity, that's a new term for many of you. That will explain it in further detail so you can share that with others. And then a very in-depth look at change management, all the things you need to do effectively at change management for rolling out and scaling an entire automation program. And that's included in the IA Global Market Report that you have available as a download as well. Before I conclude my comments, if you hit the green arrow in the bottom of your screen, that will advance it to the next session, so you'll be up and ready to go for that. In which case, that next session is going to be developing automation at scale, choosing the right model. We're going to be talking about some of the as-a-service type discussions and have a really interaction discussion with someone with a long-time industry expert in this area, John Cotton-Jim. Following that, if you're not able to join us, come back for the make versus buy in the best of both worlds, where Warner Brothers will talk about the analysis of, do you build this as a competency, do you outsource it, or how is there some type of middle ground for that for a hybrid model? And then we're going to close out the day today with looking at going through that market report that I just talked about in further detail, talking about what people are encountering as challenges when trying to scale when it comes to change management, and some tips and suggestions about moving around that. So we will hope to see you back for the next session in just 30 minutes from now. Maureen and Guha, thank you so much for your session today. Thanks to all of you listening to this live, those of you listening to the recording of this. And we appreciate your active participation and look forward to you continuing to be involved in the Intelligent Automation World Series. On that note, this now concludes today's webinar session. Good day, everyone.
Thank you.